The ship's medbay was dark, lit only by the backup lighting, and the small emergency lamp she'd taken with her didn't help much. There was only one occupant, bedridden and strapped in, so as to not float away in the Null G. His skin was mottled and sunburned looking, and weeping sores covered the large part of his body, the pus leaking from them seeping into the sheets that were tightly wrapped around him. Occasionally, a globular ball of bloody pus would separate and slowly float away on the air currents created by the air recyclers. His eyes swam around the room aimlessly for a moment before slowly focusing on her towering form. The human started before losing track of her for a moment, before refocusing with a bit more lucidity. Captain. His voice was reedy, a weak phlegm-filled rasp. His lungs must have been half full of the same pus leaking for the rest of his body. The ship's medic had warned her about this. Without thrust, there was no gravity. Without gravity, the fluids were pooling in his body and not draining like they should. Pneumonia. They described the symptoms to her. She'd known what to expect before she walked in, but seeing it was a different matter. He was drowning. But even without that, he'd be gone soon anyway. The pneumonia was just a symptom of what was really killing him. How are you? She immediately cringed at the question. Any pain? She said, trying to save herself. He blinked at her slowly before nodding slowly. A little, but the dog's got me pretty juiced up. He let out what could have been a wet cough or an attempt at a laugh. Think he's got me on every painkiller there is. She could only, in response to that. He weakly nodded at the dim LEDs above the bed. Can't get the core back up? She felt ice run down her spine at the human's question. We're working on it. Should be just a few more hours. Despite the medications and the decrepit state of his body, the man still managed to see through it. Don't lie to me, Captain. I say you won't be that. I did save the ship after all. He laughed. Besides, you're horrible at it. The core is gone. Total loss in containment and the magnetic bottle could draw us a shot. If you hadn't shut it down, we would have lost the ship, she said, looking at the deck. So I was right, he stated, before devolving into a coughing fit. Told that ferry bastard that we couldn't run the core that hot for that long. You never have gotten along with Huluk, have you? She asked. No, can't really say I ever really cared for him, he said. She hated herself for asking, but she had to know. Then why did you toss him out? Then he'd be right here with me, he said simply. But he could have helped you at least, she said. Could have, the human agreed. But I knew what needed doing, and I knew I could do it by myself, he said, and fell into a coughing fit. Little globules of bloody mucus escaping between his fingers, and tears began pooling on his face in the 0G. He might have been an ass. Doesn't mean we both had to die like this. She watched the video a dozen times. The pair of them had been heading down to the reactor compartment, a customary argument already trucking along between the two of them, when the radiation alarm had begun to blare from their hand terminals and from the ship's speakers. They both pulled their terminals from their pockets and shared a quick glance at each other, then the door behind them, as it began to close before the human grabbed a fistful of Hulk's uniform and spun on the spot and tossed him through the rapidly closing hatch. Just did it, the human continued, a wet cough punctuating the sentence as his eyes glossed over. Didn't even think about it. It just happened. They were silent for a time before she spoke again. He wants to talk to you, she ventured. The dying man waved a weak hand at her. Later. I'll let you get some rest then, she said, and moved towards the exit. She had her hand on the light switch when the man's voice stopped her. Leave them on, he said. His voice oddly strong, but tingled with something she couldn't place. I don't wanna... He paused for a moment, as if catching himself from saying something he didn't want to. I don't want to go home in the dark.